Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, lace up, or slip on your shoes, and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps. So my biggest memory of starting my period unexpectedly and not having access to products occurred in middle school. I was walking down the hall and I felt it coming. The bell was rang, so I was going to be late for class. I still had not told my mother, so I didn't have access to period products at home unless I bought them myself. And there was no time to get to the nurse's office before class. I was walking with my friend Kim Smallage, I remember this, and she said, just go to the bathroom and use paper towels. So if you've ever been to a middle school bathroom in the 70s, paper towels were brown, they were crunchy, they didn't really dry your hands at all. I took about 10 of them out, I went into the stall, I dumped the period clots into the toilet, I wiped my underwear clean with toilet paper, and I folded about 7 paper towels into my pants, and I pulled them up. Lucky for me, I was wearing jeans. However, blood does show through jeans, so I took off my sweater and tied it around my waist and went to class. In episode 181, all these years later, we're in the 2020s now, we're going to talk about period product accessibility, period poverty, stigma, as it relates to current day middle and high school students. So when I mentioned to my neighbor Jenn that I was doing a bunch of episodes on the periods, she said, oh, let me be a part of it, because Jenn has spearheaded, along with a ton of other things for students at the high school, Concord High School in Concord, New Hampshire's own version of the Red Dot Project, which is a project that works to provide period products reached at ease and without judgment to anyone who needs them. So welcome, Jenn.
Hi.
The last 2 or 3 episodes I've done, which I'm sure you know because I've blabbed on and on about them, have been around period misinformation, stigma, period poverty, all of the things that girls and women and anyone that has a period goes through. The Red Dot Project is relatively new at the high school, and I first came to know of it because I enlisted the support of Matt Cashman, who's our school district buildings person, to get lockers for you guys. And what I love doing is making people uncomfortable. So I went right up at a school board meeting and asked him if we could have lockers for the Red Dot Project. And when he asked what it was, I told him. Got very red in the face, but was very good about finding lockers, I think, and wanted me to know, which gave me a little chuckle. So tell us a little bit about what the Red Dot Project is.
Absolutely. So one of the other things that I've started at the high school is a thrift store. And what we started to experience were young women coming down and saying, I need pants. I've started my period, I've bled through, and I need to change. And then the next question was, do you have underpants? And of course we didn't, yoga pants, shorts, jeans, sweatpants, joggers. We have all of those things for them. So when I had taken over the thrift store, there were 2 lockers in there. And after talking to a couple of other adults who helped staff the thrift store, we realized that this same story had happened to each of us, that there were students that came to us looking for pants, looking for underpants. And the part of the story that they shared with us is that it took a long time to get those things if they went to the nurse. And not to judge the process with the nursing staff, they're there for students that are sick. So if you're coming because you've bled through your clothing, that's a different issue. It's not a health issue. We decided to put these lockers out and order some packages of underpants. I brought this to the Fem Now Club, which I'm also a mentor for. And they were talking about the fact that the school does provide tampons and pads, one size fits all. But, beggars can't be choosers when you are in need of a tampon. But that said, the tampons are on the larger side. So if you have, a freshman girl who's very tiny, that might not be a size that does fit. So we started talking about coming up with something within the school where we could provide a variety of sizes. My first memory of having to go to the school nurse, I was 9 years old, so I was super young, and she handed me a pad that I don't even know what I would compare it to. It was gigantic. It went from belly button to the top of my butt. It was probably 2 or 3 inches thick, and it was like sitting on an actual cushion. So my little tiny 9-year-old body had to walk with this giant thing between my legs all day. So that's my first memory of having to go to the school nurse. And she was wonderful. It was the 80s, 1985, and that's what we had in 1985. We have wonderful technology now where they're, microscopic in thickness, and they have wings, and they have different flow levels, and it's just miraculous how far we've come.
You don't need to use a belt. My first
Right.
pad, you attached to a belt.
Yes, and that's the other thing. It wasn't so long ago, and then you had rags that you attached to a belt with metal hooks. Having this discussion with FemNow, they thought it would be helpful to not only have clean underpants, to have tampons in a variety of sizes, panty liners, pads. They sort of expanded upon it a little bit. They're like, how about some chapstick and some wipes? And Lila, who is one of the members of FemNow, made a poster and we started advertising. So right now we have 7 locations throughout the building, and each location, with the new lockers that Mr. Cashman had purchased for us, we were able to get the kind that have cubbies. So they're set up so that the top cubby has all the products in it: tampons, pads, and chapstick, lotion, deodorant. Deodorant's a huge thing. The day that you start your period, if you forgot to put deodorant on that day, I know that when I was younger, that would be the one day out of the year that I would stink because there's something about menstruating and being a little stinky. Having deodorant was another piece that we thought was important. That's what's in the top cubby, in addition to plastic bags, because you need some place to put those soiled underpants and those pants because you're going to have to bring them home. I can think of maybe a dozen times as a young person having had this come up where I had to take my stuff home. That's in there too. And then the cubbies below it, we have small, medium, large, extra large, and 2XL. So fresh underpants, new underpants, a variety of different dark clothing. So yoga pants, sweatpants. As the weather warms up, I'll put shorts in there so that students can ask for a pass, go to a location in the building that's fairly close to where they are, get what they need, and get back to class so that they don't miss instructional time.
Nice. It's interesting when you were talking about the nurse's office and they're there for health issues and, bleeding through your clothes isn't a health issue, except it is a health issue. It isn't perceived that way. It's not, I'm not vomiting, which is, of course, is liquid coming out of my body. Okay, so the liquid coming out is blood and it's coming out of my vagina. I'm not running a fever, although sometimes I know when I got my period, I oftentimes had strong fever symptoms. So to have to wait in line, though, it's a different ballgame because if it was a diarrhea attack, you'd go to the nurse and you'd go home. Periods, the mindset is, oh, it's just your period. Well, the normal process in the nurse's office doesn't always make sense. I know for me, if I was uncomfortable enough to go to the nurse, which wasn't always needing period products, first time I didn't have them was the last time I didn't have them. So I just carried them all the time in my backpack. But if I was sick enough and went to the nurse, another thing that often happened to me, which I think you and I talked about, is I'd get there and I'd lie down, I'd be sick, and my upper lip is sweating and all this, and maybe I didn't have a fever, and what's causing all this? Well, I'm having my period. Oh, is that all? Well, okay. Liquid, liquid, liquid. Why does this liquid not matter and all the other ones do? That's kind of a harsh way to say it. But I do think nurse's office should have easier access to period products. You shouldn't have to wait in line to see the nurse. You should be able to walk in and take them and leave, or walk in and take them and use the bathroom. Do you find that the nurses have noticed a decrease in traffic now that you have the lockers throughout the school, or have you not?
I've had discussions with them about students needing clothing, and that's definitely decreased. So whether it's because of the red dot in general for menstruation, definitely for that. But in general, they've seen a decrease because we have all of these. So a kid comes in, pouring outside. They're soaking wet. In the past, they could have gone to the nurse to borrow a pair of pants. Now every staff member has a key that they can get into the thrift store. We can change their shoes. We can change their pants, get them a dry shirt. So that part's just decreased throughout the building because of the thrift store.
Yeah, yeah. So I know that you have set thrift store hours, but for things like this, it's sort of, 24/7, so to speak. If a student's in need, somebody can get them in there.
Yep. The set hours are for shopping, 2 hours every day during the lunch block. But we've encouraged staff for any reason that if students need something, I have students come to me a lot like, hey, I need X, Y, and Z. Can you bring me down to the thrift store? So I'm like, all right, hold on, everybody,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
run down, get them what they need, and then they go on with their day. It's just less loss instructional time.
yeah.
That was really important to me as an educator when we were talking about these lockers, that they could get what they needed, change, and get back to class.
The big moniker now, we don't want to take away from instructional time. But sitting in period blood takes away from instructional time because you're not paying attention. You're
Yeah.
worrying about what's going on. One of the things I noticed in all of my research around periods worldwide is that for countries that don't have support, now let me be very clear on support. Access to products is one piece, but some countries there's no place to throw things away. So products can't be disposable or they're not going to be used. Because what do you do with a dirty pad or a used tampon if there's no garbage facilities? You don't throw it on your lawn. You don't put it under your bed. There isn't a place for these things. And then, of course, there's the social stigma where your period is supposed to be completely separate from the normal routine of culture and society. So, what happens to a lot of girls is they don't go to school. They just don't go. They stay home. I know this is hard for you as just one teacher in a big high school to track, but do you ever hear stories of girls, especially in our refugee population, our new Americans, where they come with their own cultural norms and beliefs and where they often come in extreme poverty? Do you know locally if girls miss a lot of school for their periods?
That I don't know, but we did establish a locker in the MLL area, so the multiple language learner area. When I was putting the stuff in, I got a round of applause from the young women that were in there.
Oh my God, that makes me cry.
It was one of those
Seriously.
moments. And, the expectation was you take what you need. And there's a little note inside the lockers as well that says, was this helpful to you? Then maybe consider shopping this week and picking up, a thing of pads, a thing of tampons, a new package of underpants, and just throwing it in the locker so that if someone who needs this, who can't afford these things, can just take what they need and go their way. It's hard to tell if that's actually happening. I have gotten a huge community response to support this program. So I've listed a couple lists on Facebook, and, boxes and boxes and boxes have come in. There was a alumni from Concord High. I've gotten a lot of feedback too, like, wow, I wish we'd had this when we were in high
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
And I don't think they had to have products when we were in high school. It was the 90s for me, and I was always prepared, but I feel like they were there, but it's like that next step. How do you take care of the girl who's bled through? Because you can be prepared, you can have a tampon on, you can have a pad in, and you're a mess. And everybody knew there was always a sweatshirt that someone could give you that you had to walk around in. And it was just such a common occurrence in middle school and in high school. And, as an adult, it's not like it gets better.
No,
um,
no, no, it does not. I was 23 years old when I bled through on the starting line. So my next question to you around the Red Dot Project is, so you had the round of applause from the group of students that saw you refilling it. Have you had any sort of one-on-one conversations, either with parents, with other teachers, with students around this initiative?
yes, lots of female teachers and students have been talking about the program. The teachers bringing stuff in and to support it, and then the students talking about, could we have one over here? Initially, our lockers were in the commons, which are now called houses, which get locked at the end of the school day.
Right.
So then our music kids, our theater kids, our sports kids didn't have access to these products anymore. So now we have one in the girls' locker room. There's one in the music wing. So those are accessible 24 hours a day. After we got the three new lockers from Matt Cashman, those are also two of the three are accessed through learning centers. So you can just go. However, there has been a little bit of pushback depending on personal beliefs from several of the staff thinking maybe we should have these in less obvious places so the girls are less embarrassed. One of the things that the club had felt strongly about is sort of working with our school population and trying to reduce that stigma of menstruation and period poverty and all of that. And we haven't started that yet. We've been focusing on getting as many lockers filled and out there as we can. But that's the next step. It's something that those young women are experiencing sometimes, every 3 weeks.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
um,
Right.
lasting for 10 days, that that myth about every 28 days is not true for everybody. And
No.
And I have student athletes in the club talking about last year when we started it, they were talking about how they wish they'd had more information about training and their period and being endurance athletes and all of this stuff. So we read a lot of books, which strangely came from my husband. He is a runner.
Father of
Sort of.
daughters,
Yep.
lives with 3 menstruating humans.
Yep. He just doesn't read books about male runners. Sarah Hall. So there were several books that I was able to pass along.
So when I was coaching, and I coached, in the district for 21 years, and then I taught health for 7, we talked about periods all the time. We had a period naming ceremony. I had in my coach's locker, I had tampons and pads and panty liners and all sizes and shapes. We talked about it all the time. And that came from this amazing physical therapist I had who was manipulating my back. I had a back injury. And one day he says to me, "Are you having your period?" So, of course, I immediately thought I was bleeding all over stuff because I was having it. And I said, "Yes, am I bleeding?" And he goes, "No, but your back, I've never felt your back feel this way." It was mushy. And he said, "Wow, your ligaments and tendons in your pelvis are really, really mushy," meaning they weren't stable, meaning they weren't going to hold my bone structure. So he said, "So my suggestion here is to just be mindful and just pay attention to how your lower back and hamstrings and everything feel, because your increase of injury is big right now." I paid attention to that. I shared that with all of my athletes. So I would make them keep track of their periods. Okay. When we had our first big practice, in August, all right, how many of you get your period? How many of you get it regularly? We'd have a whole conversation. I'd be like, pay attention to it. And especially in my top tier athletes, by about mid-October, they would start to come to me and say, "Well, I was due for my period and I didn't get it. Well, I'm supposed to get my period this week and I haven't gotten it." I would pay attention to that. Okay, well, then you need to maybe increase your caloric intake a little bit the next couple of days. And always these little adjustments would produce a period. But we talked about it all the time so they'd be healthy. And I had a handful of freshmen. They were uncomfortable with the conversation. So I'm quite sure none of them had started their period, but somebody was uncomfortable. Maybe they went home and talked with their parents about it. I don't know. But he told me that it was not my job as an athletic coach, my athletic director, to talk about periods, that is a conversation that should happen at home. So I'm looking at 46 girls, 40 of whom are menstruating, all of whom are asking for information. The number of questions I got, parents aren't comfortable having these conversations, and they aren't medical doctors, and they aren't counselors and therapists, and they aren't you and me who say period and ovulation and menstruation and blood and clot, like, we're saying tree and soup and sneaker. What do you hope something like, a Red Dot Project initiative will affect that aspect of menstruation?
Well, I would like to get rid of the stigma for young women. And then it was interesting when we started to do this, having a conversation with my husband, who again raised 2 young women and has lived with me for 27 years. There were things he didn't know. He didn't know it hurt. He didn't know that you might get diarrhea, that you might stink, that you might be tired. We have the jokes often, not from him, but sometimes about, oh, she's bitchy.
Must be ragging it.
Right. But what made up that all the factors that went into that woman being just a little snippy that day, he was unaware of. So it kind of blew my mind a little bit. Like, how did you not know these things? And it's because we didn't talk about them. When we're sitting around the table having dinner, I'm not talking about what's going on with my cycle and how I'm feeling and what's happening until, of course, it got out of control and then I had to have an ablation. But the day-to-dayness of menstruation was something he didn't know. As a teaching assistant, he gets to go into lots of classes and learns all kinds of fantastic things that we weren't taught in the 90s. So I said to him, what are you learning in health class? And there were things, the nitty gritty of it was definitely a lot more detailed than I remember health being. And of course, there's a variety of things that are covered, but boys are still snickering during some of those pieces. The young ladies in Fem Now would appreciate that those types of things would maybe informing young men more about what's going on, future partners, that, there's more, it's an iceberg.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
stuff that
Yes.
they're seeing is not the whole story.
No. One of the things I did when I taught health at Concord High School that I'm quite sure isn't happening now, and it's not because I'm some great teacher, I'm full of flaws like everyone else. So one of the things I would have the kids do final exam is I put them in groups of 4. So there were men and women, boys and girls in every group. And I would have color code the questions. So any question that had the word vagina, clitoris, labia, ovulation, menstruation, period, the boys had to read out loud. Any question that had erection, scrotum, vas deferens, ejaculation, sperm, the girls had to read. And so the first couple of times I did this, they were wicked uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to say these words. I'm like, I know you don't. They're uncomfortable. But when you're naked with your girlfriend and you want to have sex and you don't have a condom, it's not going to be helpful if neither of you know where she is in her cycle. It's not going to be helpful if neither of you understand how pregnancy happens. It's not going to be helpful if your girlfriend bleeds through her clothes at your house and you don't know what the hell to do or what to say. If you can't say the words to the person you're going to spend a lot of naked time with at some point, how are you a good partner? How are either of you good partners? It's unfortunate that all these years later, these conversations are still uncomfortable. One of my sweetest memories of Kenny is I ran into him at a convenience store, and this was before we were together. And he had like a Super Plus tampons and pads. And I'm like, what do you do? And he goes, wife, daughter. He went and got those things because they were both home feeling miserable.
Mhm.
And I remember thinking, God, I couldn't even wrap my head around that comfort. Do you have a red dot locker in the thrift store?
We don't have a locker. We do have pads. We do have the bottoms, but I don't keep underwear down there. I do have some in my room too. And then, ironically, well, not ironically, there's a male English teacher who has a menstruation station in his classroom that has pads and chocolate, I think he said, and tampons.
Amazing. Now, is it well received? Like, are kids freaked out by it or?
No, I don't think so, not at all. And it's just in a basket in the room. So it's not like it's hidden away. It's right there, just like the cough drops are and the
Right.
tissues. It's, taking care of your body.
Which I think ultimately that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
Like when I think of the teachers that were telling you these should be in more subtle places so kids aren't embarrassed, there will be kids who are embarrassed. But if
Mhm.
they know they can find one that's hidden, they'll go to that one. That's
Yeah.
the one they'll go to. And then those that aren't won't. They'll be in a busy passing period and open up that locker and take what they need and close it. So in my mind, all those conversations are a positive part of the bigger picture, but we do need to make period poverty and period stigma and only holding females accountable for dealing with it a thing of the past. I
Mhm.
really do feel that open conversations are a hugely important piece of all of this. My
Mhm.
bad period experiences were in ninth grade. That's when I started. What was it like for you to be that young and have to go through this? I mean, for me, everyone had it. And I was just so frustrated that I didn't have it. It made me feel like I wasn't truly a girl and it was horrible. What was it like? What was the other side of that like for you? And how is that formulated how you feel now?
Well, I was fortunate enough that my mother had spoken to me about everything prior, probably never anticipating that I would be that young. And then when it happened, you have a visual of what you think this is going to be like. And then, of course, it's nothing like you think it's going to be like. So when it started, I didn't even know what the heck was happening. It was a lot to manage at 9. When you think about that executive functioning skill of having to be prepared for, excessive bleeding. So you have your period, maybe you bring what you think you need, and then you bleed through everything that you brought. Just that level of planning for a 9 and 10-year-old. I couldn't rely on any of my friends. It was just teachers and the nurses because no one else had their periods. Having to manage all of those things was beyond a 9-year-old's
Right.
ability. So I did end up staying home a lot because I was sick. I was vomiting. I had diarrhea. I was miserable for those first few years. And then they put me on the pill when I was super young because that was one of the ways that could help with all of those things. I had an internal examination at, 11 so that they could put me on the pill, which was again invasive.
Now, do you feel that being on the pill gave you any negative side effects as an adult? Or
Well, I certainly didn't have any issues with the fertility. And then I was probably 32 or 33 when I had the ablation because my periods were so heavy. I remember going to an event where there was a porta potty, and I am really an anti porta potty type of person. And I spent the entire time in the porta potty. And after
just
that, I said, I can't live like this.
right, right, right.
Not to mention, I was anemic. I've been fortunate enough that a huge portion of my adult life, I haven't been menstruating because I had the ablation and it was successful.
Yeah, yeah, that's incredible and incredibly invasive. The tricky part with the pill is that, like, I never had any side effects either. And I really primarily took it for birth control. What I loved about it was my clumpy, cloddy, heavy, horrible periods went away.
Mhm.
So it was super helpful that way. And I imagine that's for you as well. I'm hoping that research will continue to create a healthier option for girls around not only birth control, but how the pill helps with all the other symptoms. Because right
Mhm.
now it just blocks ovulation, which can be a very disruptive force in the natural processes of the female body. It saved me more than once. What do you find, back to the sort of the Red Dot Project piece of this? Do you find certain items get taken the most, or is it sort of systemically everything, or?
I go about every week, every 2 weeks to go through and restock. Deodorant is a huge one. And if there's one thing I could give to every single student in the building if they want it, it's deodorant. And every classroom teacher, I think, would agree with that. We refill. We get the little travel size ones.
Yep.
And then what you use is such a personal preference when you're having your period. We provide lots of different pads, but it's the tampons that are definitely being used more than the pads.
Yeah, that would make sense. I think at that age, especially active girls who are doing sports and things like this. So I have a friend who has 6 daughters. Her middle two both use period panties. So
Yep.
she went through Victoria's Secret and spent a lot of money on them. Each child has 3 pair. When they get their period, they put them on in the morning and they bring a clean pair with them in a Ziploc baggie. And she said that they've, both like at about a year now, and they don't need to be replaced at all. They're still in fine shape. And when you think about it, each pair of pants is worn 1, maybe 2 days a month. And so it's not washed repeatedly like your standard pair of underwear might be. So they're expensive up front. But in my research, I found that the average woman over her lifetime of having a period spends between $6,000 and $7,000 on period products. That's an expensive item to place in the red dot lockers, but do you put them in there, period panties, or just
We
disposable?
we had one pair donated and one pair disappeared very quickly. I think it would be excessively expensive for the program that we have. That would have to
Yes.
be if we were to, catch the attention of one of these makers, which I'm not above writing letters to and saying, "Hey, we need your products." That would be amazing to have.
Here's the other population that's specific to Concord or to any public school setting is homeless. The
Mhm,
homeless population. We have 97 students in Concord, New Hampshire right now, 97 who are homeless. So
mhm.
they're living in a shelter, or they're living in a car, or they're living on the floor in someone's living room. There's a wonderful parent centers in Concord now, and they're connected to our preschools and all this. And they provide diapers and wipes and all of these wonderful projects. So I asked her about period products, and she sort of tilted her head at me. I'm like, if the mothers are struggling to buy diapers, they're likely struggling to buy tampons and pads. What are your thoughts on all of this? So you've addressed your population, but how do we take this very mindset and create help for women and girls that don't have a locker they can go to during the day?
You've known me for a long time, and my focus is always on community and how do we provide what the community needs. I don't know. So, thinking about amazing local businesses and maybe having spots where they
Red dot
could,
lockers. Yeah.
yeah.
Free tampon and pad products at schools are often one size fits all, the cheapest that you can buy, and not anything anyone wants to put in their pants or in their vagina with any sort of regularity. Yes, we address it, but we don't address it at all. And I imagine that that would be what would make this program so helpful because it's nice products. It's a variety of products. How do you go about getting the products? Like, how have you? I know that you're creating a culture in the high school that where, as the thrift store becomes more well known, people that use it might then think, oh, I could donate to it. Like trying to create a culture of thrifting as a way of life. What are you noticing about donations? Do you have to continually ask for them, or are they becoming more regular? And if I wanted to donate, or somebody listening to this, how
Mhm.
would they go about doing that?
So, we started the program last year and I put out the information to staff. And then all of a sudden, I would come into my classroom and there'd be, bags of brand new underpants and pads and tampons. So that started to be sort of a regular occurrence. Before the holidays this year, I did an Amazon list, got such an amazing response from the community. Coming home, that there might be tampons on my porch and the inside of my porch. People who knew where I lived were dropping stuff off. Like I said, alumni. One woman did the entire list, and I didn't realize when I set it up that once you purchase something, it took it off the list, kind of like a registry. So it wasn't until someone said, "Hey, how come there's only boot clips on this list?" This one individual had purchased everything on my list. So it sort of felt like people around the holidays used that opportunity to give back to their community that way.
Yes.
Since we recently had Amazon Business, I recreated the list through that and posted that one. And if you go to Crimson Closet on Instagram,
Yep.
that's in our bio.
Did they just put a Concord High School address for shipping?
It's already set up that way.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Great, great. What about people who want to send money? Is money helpful or do you prefer the
Well,
actual products?
well, I think either or, because, sometimes you can go into Target and it's a particular week and they're getting rid of whatever the fall underpants, and
Yes,
you can get a
yes.
package of 10 for $4.50. Any deals anybody finds, absolutely. But on the flip side, I can find 18 package of 18 from Amazon Basics, and it was just over $1 a pair. It was pretty inexpensive. I do have one parent who has a company that matches her donations, and she sent in a donation. So I ordered, $100 worth of underpants
Yeah,
this week.
nice. And you facilitate this primarily yourself, like restocking the lockers and that sort of thing?
Yep.
Wouldn't it be nice if you could get some arms out there so everyone
Yeah.
owns a locker and all the products are in their classroom and perhaps when they need more, they come to you and restock.
This is early days, second year of the project itself. And the young women in Fem Now have done things like created flyers, put flyers in each bathroom, in each female bathroom, and then the standalones, so that everybody knows that if you need something, here's where you go. If you know anything about Concord High at all, bathrooms can tend to be a little bit of an issue for things
Yes.
getting either thrown away or written on, but those flyers have not. They actually made it through last year, through the summer. And the only reason we've had to update them is because we have additional places where they can go now. So that spoke volumes to me as an educator, that this was important information that the community wanted to know and wanted to keep up to support each other.
Right, that's amazing. Another population that I would imagine would benefit from the Red Dot Project, and maybe not from, well, maybe getting caught off guard, but if you have a non-binary or a trans boy, do you have any stories or experience around that aspect of it? Or anyone sharing with you, thank you for doing this? Or,
I've had lots of thank yous from the students that know where it's coming from. I think there's probably a lot of students who have no idea where where these lockers have come from and why it's important to someone like me that they have access to it. And that's perfect. I don't want that acknowledgement. I just want them to have what they need.
yes,
Um,
exactly. After doing all this period research, stigma is stigma. And when you really want to identify as non-binary or male and you have this very female stigmatizing body condition, I feel like we need to make sure we address that and take care of those kids. So that came to mind. It wasn't an initial thought for me because I'm using my own experiences, but if you were to give one piece of advice to another school that might not have this program that wanted to start it, is there anything that, like, what would be the easiest way to get this going in other schools?
the lockers were really helpful, especially the ones that had the cubbies. And then the other thing that really seemed to be helpful is putting those announcements in each of the bathrooms so that students knew, you're sitting on the toilet, you're like, oh no, I started my period. What? I don't have anything. And then there's the sign like, whoa, this is
Yes.
where you can
Yeah,
go
exactly. Oh,
to
great
fix
mystery of
this
life.
issue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
When I was the robotics advisor, a lot of times we'd have these competitions, and one of the things, we go to a high school, and the high school would have baskets that would have all of the things that I just mentioned, except for underwear and
And
pants.
were the baskets like in the bathrooms?
Yep, they were on the sinks.
Oh, yeah.
And they would do that in the bathrooms for females. And then I never went into the male bathrooms, but I think they did things like deodorant and lotion
Yeah.
and
And those sorts of things.
maybe some mints or something in
Yeah.
the boys' bathroom. So that was another way that I've seen it done. We have signs on all of our lockers. We haven't had any issues. Everything has been respected. It's been over a year since we've had the program. So
That's wonderful. Is there anything you'd like to close with? Any sort of thought or a story or message or?
if you're interested in helping out the program, to visit us on Instagram, Crimson Closet. I update that list. So like right now we have too many pads and we need more tampons.
It's all good stuff. As I end my podcast always, be good to yourself. So be good to yourself. Advocate for your own period health and period poverty. Don't be afraid to ask for stuff if you need it or ask for a friend. Be good to someone else. Donate to the Red Dot Project or bring all your old clothes to the thrift shop or write a check. Whatever way you can help those around you in need. And this is a pretty specific need that will never go away or be met because new people will be born every day. New people will be poor every day. New people will be uneducated every day. New people will be afraid every day. This is something that will happen for all of time. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.